Please welcome to the stage NBA legend, philanthropist, and businessman, Mr. Norm Nixon.
Hello, hello. Wow. Let's give another hand to the City of Hope inspirational team. I wish I could sing. God, I wish I could sing and move people like that. This is going to be a great evening. It's an evening of inspiration, empowerment, and the power showing up for ourselves and our family. But before I get started, I just like to say a couple of good things. I've done this a couple of times around the country, and I always like to give a shout out to AIDS Healthcare Foundation. I see the CEO is here. But not only do they do a lot of work, but I've had the opportunity to work with them over the last couple of years, and it's amazing. They're in 57 countries, over 3 million patients around the world. And I always get mad because sometimes I just think nobody ever heard of the work that they do. So I always like to speak it out loud because I like for people to know. Now, before we move into this, we're going to move into this next phase. Let me introduce our panel. So normally what we like to do, I write down questions, but this thing always takes off organically. So I'm going to introduce the panel. We're going to talk about voting, talk about things we think you guys should do. Then we'll open it up for a few questions. So now I'd like to introduce the panel. The first person I introduce is the Southern Bureau Chief for AIDS Healthcare Foundation, Ms. Tracy Jones. You know, Tracy has over 26 years of nonprofit experience. She works in another area of the company, but she's always been a big advocate for men's health, mental health for our teenagers, our young teenagers. And I didn't realize we had so many problems in our communities until Tracy told me about our young black men committing suicide. And we had a panel about that, and believe me, I learned a lot about that because I was one of those fathers that did so many things wrong, and I learned so many things about me not opening myself up to my kids. So it's always great to have Trace on the board. The next person I'll introduce needs no introduction. Everyone in California should know him. Former Senator Steve Bradford. Steve was elected to the Senate in 2016. You know, he's wherever you want to sit, Steve. You're the man, so you can sit wherever you want to sit. When Steve was at the Senate, he single-handedly directed a lot of funds to our community. Cal State Dominguez Hills. Who else? Compton College, Charles Drew, and also the Debbie Allen Dance Academy, instrumental in us being where we are. He was elected as the chair of the California Legislation Black Caucus. And I know you guys heard about Bruce's Beach, where they turned the beach back over to the black family and eventually got the money. This is the man that spearheaded all of that. So I'm going to give him his flowers. The next guy, I always learn so much sitting around listening to him. He comes with receipts. He goes to Washington, D.C. He talks to senators, governors, everybody. And when you challenge him, you better come with the receipts, because if you don't have the receipts, he's going to kick you around a little bit. Mr. Roland Martin. And you guys can see him on Roland Martin Unfiltered. So be prepared, get your notes out, and be ready to listen to him. The last person that I'm going to introduce is a gentleman that made it possible for us to be here. His father was the minister here. He's taken over this, and he's done so much for our community. If you look at this campus, he's getting ready to start his middle school, elementary school again. They had one of the largest elementary schools in the city for many years until charter schools came around. But he's getting ready to challenge that again. Pastor Jeremy Dixon. Good to see you. So before we start, since we in the pastor's house, you know how pastors are, you got to let him welcome you guys. Pastor, you want to start us off with a few words?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's so good to see all of you. Grateful that you all are here. Let me start by saying again, Would you give our Center of Hope worship team a round of applause? And we appreciate them. And then let me just welcome you onto our campus. Hopefully you can sense the Spirit of God is here, but also that this is a kind, warm, and generous place. And I think it's important that we're having this conversation in this space. The church has always been at the center of advocacy for neighborhoods that were oftentimes overlooked, left out, marginalized. And I think it's important that as we think about the important ways in which we want to serve our communities, that we remember that faith is supposed to be at the center of those conversations. And the work of churches all around this city and around the country, I think, are doing some incredible things, but we have to be more unified in the ways in which we approach this great work. And I'm so grateful to be a part of what AHF is doing and the great work of all of you that are here. So thank you so much again for being here. Nita, thank you for allowing us to be a part of this. We appreciate you. And of course, to Michael, we're so glad to be here. So thank you so much, Norm.
So, Tracy, I'm going to let you start this conversation out. This whole thing is going to be about voting and why it's important for all of us to vote and for all of us to be active. So what do you say to the young people now that say their votes don't matter?
Yeah, I've had several conversations. Much to his chagrin, I have a 19-year-old that I use as my test bunny, along with Anita's son, Armand, because we want to understand what can we do to make sure that we're talking directly to you. Roland and I were having a conversation earlier, and I was doing some research on my flight over about why is it that we've got such great apathy among young voters. And we've got young people saying things like, you know, I'm willing to vote if you make it easy, so why can't I vote absentee? Why isn't this something that can show up on my phone? They say things like, I really don't understand why y'all make such a big deal about it because you make us come vote and nothing changes. They say things like, well, if I understood exactly what it was you wanted me to vote for because you were talking directly to me in the ways I want to be spoken to, it'll be easier for me to do what it is you think I want to do. But the single thing that we know that works is when they mama say, get out that bed and put on your shoes, right? There's no greater influence in the life of a young person than their parents, especially their mamas and their grandmamas. So I say, and Roland laughs at me, all the women in the audience, raise your hands. Now, all the women in the audience that voted in the last election, raise your hands. Yes, ma'am. That's why we got to do this. That's why you got to make a commitment to make sure that they do this, because your voice is the most important one in their lives.
Okay. Roland, we were in the back. We were just talking about communication, about problem Democrats are having trying to communicate with the voters, and they just one line of communication for everybody. What is the problem with that? Just talk about that issue a little bit.
Well, it's a perfect example. First of all, glad to be here, Pastor, glad to be here. I appreciate Tracy, your organization, being sponsors, and all the people who made this possible. Let me also say Congresswoman Maxine Waters brings greetings. Yes, she called me 3 times today to let me know this is in her district. Make sure she get a shout out. Second of all, we are also live streaming this on my platform. We are close to having 2 million subscribers on our YouTube channel, our Black Star Network. And so I appreciate everybody who actually has been supporting us. We'll be 8 years old on September 4th next month. And that's a perfect example. So if you turn the lights up, it'd be great. So if you look around here, there are more empty seats than there are seats filled. And what often happens today, folks go, oh man, the church should have been packed. Well, the problem is if you're only thinking about in the room, then you're losing what the goal is. If you're not using communication tools to spread it. There's somebody who couldn't make it today who's in LA. But there's somebody who's not in LA who's in California who could be watching. There's somebody who is in the other 49 states that could be watching as well. So we have to actually change our approach. We also have to understand that demographics matter. And so when Tracy asked the question, how many women in here voted, we'll do this by hands or applause. If you're 65 plus, please raise your hand or clap. Just go ahead, we'll do it this way. We'll do by clapping. If you're 65 plus, clap. Okay? If you're 55, 64, clap. Got it. If you're 45, 50, if you're 45 to 54, clap. If you're 35, 44, clap. No. There's a reason we're doing this. If you're 25 to 34, clap. If you're 18 to 24, clap. That exercise right there explains to you voting. The people that vote in this country, black or white, Latino, Asian American, are 65 plus. The next group is 55, 64. The worst voting demographic historically has always been 18, 44. Now, what we have to understand is today, the largest demographic of voters or people in America are millennials and Gen Z, not baby boomers. But millennials, Gen Z complains about why all these old folks in office, because old folk vote. And so I remember when Reverend Jackson was in Ferguson, and there were some young brothers, and he was talking to them on the corner, and they were complaining about police brutality. They were complaining about what happened, and they said they wanted to see the cop go to jail. And Reverend Jackson said, do y'all want to see that cop indicted? Yeah. Do y'all want to see him convicted? Yeah. Y'all want to see him go to prison? Yeah. He said, and if, would you convict him if he was on the jury? Yeah. And Reverend Jackson said, but you cannot serve on a jury unless you're a registered voter. So part of the problem is we have folk 1834, 1844 who literally don't fully understand how the dots are connected politically when it comes to voting. And so the mistake that we continue to make is we keep having affirming conversations of folk who have a high likelihood of vote. And then what we don't do is have a micro strategy of saying, okay, I'm going to make sure that if I come to this, I'm going to bring somebody 1844. We do the exact same thing. And so I'll say this here, and some people might get offended, but that's fine. If you have a significant number of people who are 18 to 35, 1844, who are not voting, that tells me that there was a mama and a daddy or a grandfather who did not take them to the polls when they voted. So the reason I am as politically engaged as I am, because my mother and father, dad's 79, mom is 79 in November, they were engaged with our civic club. I stood outside of polling locations, passing stuff out for people when I was 8, 9, and 10. They took us to city council meetings, and so we were politically engaged. They did not graduate from college, didn't go to college. They were high school graduates, but they cared about their community. And so what we have to understand is we must take it upon ourselves community-wise, not party-wise, to say we have to create voter engagement, but not around the election. The election is the end of one process, it's the beginning of another. And so when the midterms are over in November, on November 3rd, on November 4th, we should be saying, how are we now engaging and teaching and educating folk for the next election, the school board election, the DA race, the city council race, the state representative race, and then lead to the 28 election. And so that has to be the process. And so you're gonna hear a lot about micro, macro. We have to be thinking small to get large, but too many of us, frankly, are hoping people turn out as opposed to us engaging them and making sure they turn out.
Senator Bradford, let me ask you a question. How do you keep citizens engaged when there's no election or in between elections?
You have to be present in the community. That's one thing I was strong on in my 26 years as an elected official, of always being present. Many times you see elected official only during election time, but you got to stay present, and you got to be willing to meet with folks where they are. Far too often we're trying to always lead people to where we think they should be instead of meeting them where they are, meeting them in the community, meeting them in the church. So that's critically important. And like you're saying, asking them to be engaged. the question always asks, how does, bad people get elected? It's when good folks don't vote. So we need to make sure that they understand the importance of their vote. And many folks, as Roland stated, don't understand the importance of voting, don't understand the power of your vote. It truly changes things. It really does. And we've made too many sacrifices in this country for us now to stay at home and think it doesn't matter anymore. It probably matters more today than it did in the 60s and the 50s when we were fighting for voter rights. So we have to be willing to meet folks where they are and educate them, but not talk down to them, but talk straight to them and let them know that you're important, we see you, we hear you, and that's probably one of the most direct ways you can do it.
So, Pastor Dixon, most of us know
Get the
when we
claps.
vote. We know we're voting for president. We know we're voting for in the governor's races. Why do down ballot votes have the biggest impact on our lives?
Yeah, I think, and this is a common phrase that everyone uses, all politics is local. And too often, if the conversation is restricted to the presidency, I think people on the ground experiencing everyday issues feel disempowered about what they're experiencing every day. When they recognize that voting for the district attorney, voting for local judges, voting for city council people has direct impact on their lives, then they find themselves, I believe, even more inspired to engage in the political process. But I want to go back for a moment to what Roland just said, and this is not a criticism, but an observation. As much as we're looking at an audience that is largely made up of our wonderful baby boomer constituency.
Seasoned saints.
There you go, some church words. I'm the youngest person on this stage, and I'm 46.
There you go.
And so I think a big part of the conversation needs to be the ways in which, number one, and this was also stated, and I think we'll talk about it a little bit later, how are we informing a younger populace about the civic process, about how government actually operates and works? How are we saying it in ways that they can understand? I think there is an air of elitism when it comes to politics in this hour, and I think we need to be much more specific with the common tongue on how do we explain to younger voters how to get engaged on the local level. And I believe when people can see their voter decision impact their everyday life, it'll cause them to be more engaged, not only on a larger scale, but on a longer field, because they'll recognize that they can see. It's that kind of work and reward. When they see doing something, impact something, they're much more likely to be more engaged if they can understand the process in a more meaningful way.
It's connecting the dots, Norm. So since we're in California, and I guarantee you Tracy will back me up in this, I understand. How has the LGBT community, how is it that they became such a forceful lobby? AIDS in the 80s. When AIDS hit in the 1980s, San Francisco, LA, they created organizations. Those organizations mobilized and organized around funding. City council, state capitol, federal government. What was born out of that were other organizations that expanded the agenda beyond AIDS. And so you go, wait a minute, hold up. So when you look at same-sex marriage, when you look at all of these issues, the mobilization and the organization was born out of health. We have to connect the dots. So when folks say, I want to see certain things happen, I want to see my community change, they have to understand, and Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture once said this, show me an individual who has impacted black folks and they could not do it unless they did it through an organization. The problem that we are living with today is that many of us want to live in silos. So brother over here is wearing a Kappa. That's a cute hat. I'm an Alpha, though. So he's wearing a hat. He's a Kappa. There are folks in here, again, I'm an Alpha. There are AKs, there are Deltas, there's Divine Nine, there's Links, there's Prince Hall Mason, there's Eastern Star, there's Jack and Jill. We've got various church groups. We have massive organizations in the black community. What we do not have is a situation where they are working together to pool resources and talent to drive an agenda. And so just imagine if you take 12 months out of the year, you got to take the Divine Nine, and now you take, again, Prince Al Mason, Eastern Star, and let's say Links. And then they say, okay, one organization take 1 month where we will go en masse to city council meeting. So imagine if 3, 4, 5, 6, 800 deltas and AKAs and alphas are showing up every single month. He's an elected official. I guarantee you he's going to say, why are they here and what do they want? And so now if they've met, they have a consistent agenda. So when they go in, so the February agenda ain't different from the March agenda, not different from the April agenda. That's how you use your collective power. Dr. King talked about that in his April 3rd sermon, 1968 at Mason Temple, that we individually are poor, but collectively represent one of the largest economies in the world. So where we have to be is we have to be moving as a collective to be able to drive an agenda. It can't happen in an individual organization, but when one gets with 3, then 5, then 8, then 10, then 15, 20, thing changes. Same with churches. What I've said to pastors is, you can't try to get all of LA. Just create a 0.10 circle around your church and say, we're going to hit every single door. Republicans touch their voters on average 10 to 12 times before Election Day. Democrats touch their voters 4 times. Now, how are we creating our own black political power to reach our people? It can only happen through organization. And that's what we have to be emphasizing if we truly want to be effective change agents.
So Tracy, what do you say? Right, we have organization, we need organization to mobilize and work together. But what do you say to the young people who say to you that, why should I vote? My vote doesn't matter.
Pretty much to the point that Roland was making, you know, what we usually say is, what do you want to change? What do you want? They usually will say something like, I want to buy a house. I want to be able to buy a house. I want to come out of school without debt. They say, I want to eventually be able to have my own business. I hear that all the time, those 3. They want a house, they want to get out of school without debt, and they want to be able to have their own business. They say, Miss Tracy, I want my own. I don't want to work for nobody else. So you say, how do you think you're going to get there if we don't change some of the systems that currently exist that are keeping you away from those 3 things? You get that change by voting. I don't understand, because it really don't seem like it matters. It don't seem like nothing else changes. And you show them, you know, I'm from Ohio, so I usually will say something like, were you able to get your car off the street during the winter? No, my car was stuck because they said they wasn't going to do nothing but shovel the mayor's streets. You should have voted so you could make sure that they would shovel your street. You got to make it that specific.
Yes, and not only make that specific, you got to take the housing piece, but you have to connect it to federal, state, and local. Because housing is zoning. That's city council. When you talk about HUD programs, block grant funds, that goes to the state, they disperse locally. Federal, FHA loans, then the whole deal with appraisals. So I had black folks who say, well, I'm voting for Trump because he's going to improve my economics. Last year, Biden-Harris, black-owned businesses received $10 billion of federal contracts, only 2%, but it was the highest ever. Under Trump right now, that's at 1.2%. That's a loss of nearly $5 billion. Those black-owned businesses had employees. Those employees have families. They have kids. Now there are black kids who, because they've lost those contracts, who've had to leave certain colleges. Black folks have now had to sell those homes, foreclosed on. So we have to walk people through. So what we have to get back to is what happened, frankly, during the 60s when we held black kids out, but we had freedom schools. Every single week, somewhere in a black community, there should be a citizenship education training session taking place. That's called City Council 101, State Government 101, School Board 101, Federal Government 101, and it has to be ongoing, because if we don't teach people, then they won't be able to get it. You're not getting it in school. There's no news show. There's no news show on a single, there's no news show on BET. There's no news show on TV One. There's no news show on Clio TV. There's no news show on BET Her. So if you take all of your black networks, not a single one has a news show. Not a single one. My show got canceled in December 2017. That was the last daily news show on a black network, which is why I created the digital show. So we have to understand you're not gonna get this on MS Now or CNN or Fox News or ABC. So we have to create the vehicles to educate and teach so folk understand a year before the election, not in October and the votes in November.
But one thing I'll say to that, we don't own any of those networks anymore. We used to own BET, we used to
True.
own a lot of them. So Senator Bradford.
But I own mine.
Well, you can own on the digital space, but I used to
But I own it.
those. The question I was going to say, break it down even more about how the local elections affect us on an individual basis, street cleaning, trash. Just break it down for us a little
I
bit.
think Roland and Pastor touched upon it, but yeah, I served on the local level, I served on the state level, and I was always miffed by the number of people who would call me when I was in the state and says, I have a pothole in front of my house. I says, well, I will make the call for you, but that's your city council person's responsibility. That's your mayor's responsibility to make sure that pothole is fixed, make sure that tree is trimmed, to make sure you have a traffic light. A lot of folks don't understand the level of government and what they're responsible for. Even the number of people who would call me about their passports. I had a friend who's a musician. He was going out of the country, and he says, I need my passport. I says, well, who's your congressperson? He says, I don't know. I said, well, that's who handles that, even though I made the call for him. But it goes back to what Roland's saying. Also, you have to vote. But you got to understand the levels of government. And mostly everything that impacts you on a daily basis is on the local level. That's why the saying goes, all politics are local. On the federal level and the state level, we primarily provide the funding for those programs. But on the local level determines what kind of schools you have, what kind of public safety you have in your community, how your streets are swept on a regular basis. I mean, it's all local. And a lot of folks failed to vote on those local elections. I ran for city council, and I remember one year I failed. I won't say I lost. I was 32 votes short. Okay? 32 votes short. That was less than a half a block of people who said, oh, I didn't know we had an election. But they were complaining about all what was going on in the city of Gardena. When I got elected to the city of Gardena, they were on the brink of bankruptcy. And not until I got to the council did people say, I've lived here all my life, but I didn't know all this was going on until you got here, because we start talking about all those things that were being impacted. So it's about understanding what levels of government impact you on a daily basis, but it's on the local level. And many times that's what we ignore the most. I was on the ballot in June. I ran statewide, and I was calling folks, and one person said, oh, I don't vote for that position. I said, what do you mean? Oh, those are positions I don't vote for. I says, this impacts your life every day, and you say you don't vote for that position. But a lot of folks are so clueless. And we were talking about earlier about judges. That's one of the issues you all should be concerned about, because people of color are prosecuted more than anything else. And most of the time, it's determined on who's in that robe, who's that judge that makes those decisions on whether you're acquitted, whether it's rehabilitation, whether you're, sent away for life. So you want to know who's on the ballot running for judge, so we need to look at all those things on a local level.
So Pastor, I'll come back to you. Churches historically have always been the hub for us. Everything started out of churches, the protests, the meetings, because it was really the only place we could gather. The population in churches now diminished a lot. What are you doing here to engage your young people, to get them back in to church and encourage them to be advocates or get civilly active?
That's a great question. So I think there's, I want to, before I specifically answer that question, I think something I don't want us to miss that Tracy mentioned. Is that right? It's Tracy? That Tracy mentioned. When you asked her the question, her response was, when I talk to these young people. And I think one of the things that we have lost is the art of investigation of the audience that we seek to engage. So we have premises, we have ideas, we have concepts, And part of what we want to do is we want to push as much and well-meaning, push as much information out as possible without accurately discerning who we're talking to so that we can determine the best way to communicate. And so that's part of the way in which we've approached ministry here is in a couple of ways. Number one, I think it's understanding who the audience is, understanding the uniqueness of the generation that we're trying to reach. This is not to dime Roland out, but when he was up here, I saw him checking his phone, looking at the feed of what we're doing right now because he understands the power of what's happening beyond this moment. Like he's conscious of this frequency, right, that most of younger people are engaging with. So I think it's understanding our audience and finding ways to effectively communicate in ways in which they can understand that we are not so, in the church especially, we can be very high-minded, very ivory tower, and so we have to know who we're talking to. Number two, we've diversified the things in which we offer. And so while we certainly have an important liturgical space and we're preaching and we're singing, we also, as you mentioned, we got a day school we're opening. We have a 501c4 called Plan for Hope. We have a 501c3, that's our CDC. We have a studio and an entertainment company. We have so many other offerings of what ministry looks like. And I think that the active and effective minister is going to have to diversify what it puts into the marketplace if he or she is going to be effective. And so part of what we've thought about is how do we offer as many unique things. One last thing I'll say. We founded an organization called United Faith Coalition. And this coalition is designed, what we noticed was there were tons of great pastors trying to impact neighborhoods, trying to do great work, but unfortunately they were underwriting all of their work with the tithes and offerings of the saints. And so what you had was, you got a church full of members who were paying tithes and paying taxes, and then the church is subsidizing the work that their taxes should be doing by taking out of the tithe plate to help serve a neighborhood their taxes should be serving. So you had organizations who were well-meaning but couldn't scale their work. Right. And so United Faith Coalition was founded to find ways to resource them so that they could then do this incredible work but not have to do it on the backs of the church mothers. And so part of what I think is going to be compelling in this moment is how we can look at all the lenses that are available to us to impact neighborhoods. And I think young people are interested in that. They want to know, who are you touching? Who are you feeding? Who are you serving? And not just the soup kitchen anymore. They want to see enterprise. They want to see you building, as we mentioned, small faith-based and or just regular nonprofits or enterprises that help serve a wider population of people. And when young people see that, they see a growing, diverse, active populace that's doing something meaningful in the culture, they'll give you their time and attention, but I think we've got to not be one-dimensional.
Norm, language matters. We also have to understand that. Here's a perfect example. Terrence Woodbury is one of our top opinion researchers, pollsters. He was trained by Cornell Belcher, another brother, a top pollster. So 2022 election, I was interviewing him, and this is the case with 24 in present day. So if you use the phrase voter suppression, a black voter, 45 plus, hears voter suppression differently than 1844. An 1844 voter, when they hear voter suppression, they immediately associate that with the civil rights movement. So what you had was, you had black politicians, black political pundits, commentators going on television and radio going, voter suppression, voter suppression, voter suppression, voter suppression. If you were a younger voter, you were like, oh, that's that stuff back in the 60s. But according to Terrence's research, if you said they're shutting down polling locations, the young voter got that. It's literally the exact same thing. So part of this is also utilizing our experts to understand, how do we communicate? What has historically happened in our community, but also in democratic politics, that they've had a one-size-fits-all. So this is going to be our messaging for all black people. Well, the problem now is we're like everybody else. We're completely fragmented. So when we were in Georgia in 2022, helping my alpha brother, Senator Raphael Warnock, get reelected, I'm interviewing a black woman who owns a cafe. Now, here's a black woman owning a cafe. A Democratic operative, largely a white male, would think, oh, we're going to hit her with reproductive rights. She said, listen, I get that. I'm a woman, but I ain't having kids. My cafe is my business. My number one concern is, where do you stand on taxes? So I'm hearing what Herschel Walker and Warnock is saying on taxes. Now, a typical operative would never look at that sister and say, that's the language I need to be speaking to her. And so we have to begin to speak different languages to different groups. So if you're talking to black entrepreneurs and business owners, that's a different conversation, folks, when it comes to health, which is different conversation to folks when it comes to housing, which is different conversation when it comes to this. And so we have to also alter that. So we have to be, I've had the last 2 months, black male group, black Gen Z, Gen Alpha, a black low propensity group. I had different groups sharing their research data. If we don't dig deep into the data and know how to communicate with different groups, then we're going to continue to see 52, 55, max 59 voter participation. Understand, the election of Obama in 2012 was the first time in American history that black people percentage, not in the total numbers, voted at a higher percentage than white voters. That has never happened in American history. Ever since the 2012 election, our numbers went here. Our numbers went this way in 2020 because COVID expanded access to the ballot. Our numbers went here in 24. And so what we have to understand is, if we do what we did, so we were so hyped about Obama, oh, the first black president. Okay, so we showed we have the capacity to outvote them. The question is, do we have the consistency to do that?
Right. Senator Bradford, this is to you. Since we have the internet, AI, ChatGPT, and all of this artificial stuff, all that mess, how do voters distinguish between what's fact and what's misinformation?
That's a good question. I mean, much of what the information they get is online nowadays, and it's misinformation. A lot of folks looking at their phone, it's misinformation. So it requires, as your earlier question, of having folks communicate directly with folks, in the old-fashioned ways. I mean, no, we can't knock on doors on every door, but we can phone bank, we can talk to folks directly. As Roland said, it's about messaging, understanding your audience, communicating effectively, and we're not doing that anymore. Especially as Democrats, we're so concerned with being politically correct that we're now devoid of the truth. And we need to start telling the truth about situations, and we're not doing that anymore. So it's going to require us to just have those hard conversations, but being, again, I don't want to oversimplify this, but being engaged and, and just challenging folks and getting the information, because we don't pick up books anymore. We need to know our history too. We need to know, and especially for the young folks, they were the catalyst that changed the 60s and the Voting Rights Act. They were the one that were sitting in. They were on integrating those lunch counters. And the day they think they don't have the power, and many times they tell young folks that they are the future. I tell them you're the right now. And they have to understand that and believe it, that they have the power to change what's happening in their community right now, but we're not talking to them in a way that keeps them engaged. So I think just being honest and truthful with young folks and with all voters, matter of fact.
Roland, I'll let you get this one, because technically we're in a democracy. If we're in a democracy, they should be trying to expand access to voting. Why
No, that's not their goal.
Why are they attacking mail-in voting? They've already attacked the Voting Rights Act, Shelby down in Alabama versus Holder, the last portion they did in North Carolina. So why are they attacking our right to vote?
Well, look, they've always been scared to death of our power. You can go beyond the 60s and Civil Rights Act. Many of us really do not fully comprehend the fact that after the Civil War, the South Carolina state legislature was majority black. The reason you have publicly financed education in America is because of freed slaves of African descent. That was put into the Constitution in southern states. Black people did that. White folks were not going to school. If you read The Education of Blacks in the South, 1860 to 1935 by James D. Anderson, 40% of white kids in Washington, D.C. were in school. 92% of black kids in Memphis were in school. So if you study, so the reason Mississippi had a constitutional convention in 1890 and only invited one black delegate, Isaiah T. Montgomery, and they stripped black people the right to vote because they literally said, we are sick of these niggas getting elected. That was literally what was stated. On the ballot in November in Virginia, and only because of what black people did, they will vote on restoring the voting rights to the formerly incarcerated. In the early 1900s, that was put on the books because the state legislators literally said on the floor in Virginia, we got to keep these niggas from voting. That law from the early 1900s until today has kept folk from getting their voting rights, and only the governor can restore it individually. So we have to recognize that our black political power, we have transformed politics. What is now, and so they've always understood that. And so after the Civil Rights Movement, after the 64 Civil Rights Act, 65 Voting Rights Act, 6-Day Fair Housing Act, all of a sudden it was, hold up, we got to change this. Paul Weyrich, we play this video all the time. Y'all can go look it up. In 1981 in Dallas, Texas, Paul Weyrich, who is a co-founder of the Moral Majority, right-wing white evangelicals, co-founder of the Heritage Foundation, the architects of Project 2025, stated publicly, we do not want everyone to vote. They are on record. The Speaker of the House in Pennsylvania in 2016 said, if we get voter ID, we win. The Speaker of the House in Georgia said, if we don't get voter ID, we lose. So we have to understand, we have flexed our power. They've seen it, and they've said, it is Republican mantra. If we shrink the voting electorate, we stand a greater chance of winning. If the electorate expands, we will lose. So that's why they're trying to stop ballot drop boxes, institute voter ID, shut down polling elections. Right now in Tarrant County, Texas, I just had Commissioner Lisa Simmons on. They wanted to cut in half the number of polling locations. Why? Because you increase the wait time. So if you increase the wait time, then you change it. In Wisconsin, a clerk moved a voting location from a college campus to a location far out with a small parking lot, so you had to drive further, and if you got there, you couldn't find a place to park. It was all designed to frustrate you. So we have to understand that these are literal tactics that they're putting in place. The Supreme Court has allowed them to do so by gutting Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act, by gutting Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And so what we have to do is say, okay, that's the game y'all want to play? Okay. And here's what they've done. They pissed off black people. There was an election on Thursday in Tennessee. Increase in black participation in black counties. South Carolina, increase in black participation. What should be happening, we had the All Roads Lead to the South rally in Montgomery in April. What should be happening, our focus has to be, November should be the largest black turnout in American history to show them if you put in place every rule, every barrier, we gonna defeat y'all at the ballot box.
Bradford, I think you could talk a little bit about this. The new movement in the nation is the, quote, socialist movement. When you look at El Said winning in Michigan, how do you think the old Democratic establishment's going to respond to Mandami, El Said, and all these guys that are starting to win around the country?
I mean, it's all about messaging again. I mean, the Democratic Party is a big tent, but we have diverse opinions, diverse ideas and approaches to things, but it's all about communicating. And we're now operating in silos. And that's where the challenge is. And we got to remove the silos within the Democratic Party, just as we got to remove the silos across the Republican parties in all aspects. And it's about welcoming them in, but understanding what we can collectively do and having honest conversations, as I stated, instead of being politically correct, being honest about the conversations we're having and talking to people, meeting them where they are. And we're not doing that as voters. So that's why the Republican Party has been so effective, because they're talking to people at where they are. That's what the DSAs are doing right now. A lot of folks they're talking directly to me. And that's what the Democratic Party as a whole needs to do, regardless of whether you call yourself conservative, moderate, or progressive. Talk to people where they are, where they can understand it and make it relatable to them. And we're not doing that.
They just gotta stop being punks, Norm.
Well, that's a good way to say it.
No, they gotta stop being punks.
We have gotten soft. We're so concerned.
Soft, silent, safe. Look, Medicaid is socialism. Social Security is socialism. William Wallace was a progressive who ran against Truman in 1948, was talking about universal health care. That's literally what David Dinkins was a card-carrying member of the Democratic Socialists of America. Democrats' problem is they were scared of the labels. Exactly. Republicans always hit them with labels. The reason Al Said won, the reason Hong is winning in Wisconsin, the reason the sister won in D.C. mayor, the reason Mamdani won in New York, they said, you're going to call me a socialist or a communist anyway. I'm going to communicate to the people, I'm going to speak to your concerns, and the people are responding. Safe Democrats are going to have to get their act together or they're going to lose their job.
I agree. I mean, that's what I'm saying. We got to communicate on the level of the audience that we're dealing with. And I guess we're being afraid. And you're saying quit being punks.
I ain't
so
sure,
worried
Pastor.
about you cussing up here. I was praying while you was talking.
No,
Don't let him cuss, Lord.
You ain't got to worry about that. My wife is an ordained minister, but trust me, the Lord know I will cuss. But my show is called Roland Martin Unfiltered, so I'll be cussing Monday through Friday. Don't worry about today.
Well, we're talking about the attack on the
And
ballot.
punk, that's biblical. You know it is. You know it's biblical.
I think the DOJ filed a case where they wanted the Homeland Security to work with the Social Security Department to get a list of all the citizens.
Postal Service too.
The Postal Service. So people that not on that list won't be able to vote. I think the case.
No. If you're on there, if you don't turn over your state list to the federal government, they will tell the Postal Service you cannot deliver absentee ballots to those individuals.
Okay. All right. One last thing, then we're going to go to questions from the audience. I'm going to give this one to you because we talked about it. Post-Trump. We talked about what we need to do post-Trump. Trump will be here 2 more years.
So, and this goes back to what's already been stated. Part of the challenge is so much of the conversation has been we just have to defeat Trump. And I think for younger voters, while I do believe that there is some consequential conversation around that, that doesn't feel like a plan. It doesn't feel like a long-term solution if it just stops there. Right. And so part of what I think is going to engage, and I keep wanting to go back to Tracy, and you probably can talk to this a bit more better than I can, is when we're talking to young voters, they're looking for, okay, so what's the strategy that is going to in some way improve my quality of life? And I don't think that these voters are necessarily self-indulgent, that it's just about them getting ahead. I think they do have a moral compass that desires to see a world, a preferred future that everyone can win. But I think that's going to be where the heavy lifting is and I've sat in meetings with elected officials and I've asked this question. And part of what I've gotten back in some private conversations is we just have to defeat Trump. And I'm saying, well, that's not going to sell tickets. No. There's got to be a longer plan. Tracy, you want to maybe add to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I wanted to comment on your earlier question that involved AI. One of the things I often hear is authenticity. If they can smell AI from a mile away. If they see a billboard, they'll be like, AI, don't want to believe it. They will shut it down. They won't listen to it. They will not trust it. So when you talk about what information they want to hear and how they want to grasp it, they've got to feel like it's authentic. You wonder why they watch these videos that seem very, you're like, I don't get it. Because I walk past a lot of computers and go, I don't get it. They feel like that is an authentic way to communicate. The second thing is they want it from the phone they're looking at. So you need to give me that information. You need to package it in such a way that I can hear it, believe it, and trust it. And it needs to come to me through that feed while I'm doing 6 other things. That is the important, and one of the things that our illustrious leader has been communicating. Y'all need to make sure that we have followers. That is the name of the game. I can tell you some young people just recently, they posted a video that they thought was pretty tame, not that big of a deal, 21,000 views. I saw the thing ticking like, I wouldn't have watched that 5 seconds, let alone 3 minutes. But it was important to them, and it got their point across. We've got to figure out how to get their message from them to everybody else.
And you don't do the extra work, Norm. It's like, I got back to organization. So you have an organization. If you have a church, you say, you know what, y'all? You ain't got to do all that work. We got a graphic designer. We're going to create the meme. We're going to create 4 or 5 slides. We're going to type the caption. All you got to do is copy and paste and download. That's what you have to do. Every single person, raise your hand if you have a Facebook account. Twitter/X. Instagram. Okay. So understand, I guarantee you, some of y'all are saying, yeah, but, okay, Roland, you got 5 million followers. I don't have that. But your 100 with her 200 and her 50 and his 300, all of a sudden can be several 100,000. So imagine if in your own group, you say, hey, y'all, I have a graphic on my phone right now that shows that since 1989, 96% of all jobs created in America have happened under Democratic presidents. 96%. So imagine if you say, hey, I found this graphic. It is real. It's not fake. All of y'all post the same thing on your pages. Now you're spreading a message. That's how you move as a collective. So you only might have 100, but if your whole 100 spreads the message, it goes beyond. We have to stop waiting for somebody else to come down from on high to give us this grand plan and come talk to all of us at one time. No, Ella Baker, one of our greatest organizers, not black, in American history, where she and Dr. King clashed. Dr. King believed pulpit to pew. Ella Baker believed pew to pulpit. She believed that if you move and mobilize the masses, they can actually move the population. In my book, I have it over here. We talk about Montgomery bus boycott. What we don't understand is Dr. King did not start the Montgomery bus boycott. The preachers did not start the Montgomery bus boycott. It was Joanne Robinson and the Women's Political Council in Montgomery that started the boycott. When the preachers got involved, they finally caught up with the people. The people were always ready to move. And so that's how we have to be moving. We've got less than 100 days. And so if you're in this state, you should be saying, how am I using my social media to kick out messages? And then look at my daughters and sons and nephews and grandchildren and say, okay, no, what are you posting? What are you posting? I need to see what you're communicating. We got to be willing to challenge folk. We got to be willing to say, no. You posted about housewives or other stuff. No. You need to be talking about this here. And so they say, well, look, I don't know nothing about that. You need to sit them down. Like, if somebody say, Pastor, it'd be be great if you could talk to the person about my job. And your response, you at your job. You talk to them. If you sitting in my church, listen to sermons every Sunday, you talk to them. And then you go pick them up and bring them to church with you. Folk got to put some skin in the game and stop waiting on others.
All right. At this time, we're going to take some questions from the audience. I think there are a few microphones out there. Who has the microphones? Okay, go ahead.
To help narrow down voting responsibilities
Can you hold the microphone closer to her mouth and so we can hear?
To help narrow down voting responsibilities, how many times per year other than the presidential election should we be voting? I think if voting is approached as a question such as, did you know you're supposed to vote such and such times per year, this will spark interest, engaging new and consistent voters.
You should be voting every time there's an election. As I stated, just this past June, some person said, oh, I don't vote for those positions. You need to vote every time there's an election. It's many voters that I've run into, people, period, who says only vote in presidential elections. Every election is important, but the presidential one is not the most important.
Right.
The local elections are the most important. So every time there's an opportunity to go to the polls, you need to be doing that.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but I am. How old are you? 36. Here's what we have to understand. King gets killed and assassinated in 68. So really, that progress began in 1970. You had a group of people from 1970 to 2000s who were the ones who were doing what he's saying. They were the people who told us what was coming on, what was happening, what was going on at City Hall. You had a lot of infrastructure in the black community. So I'm going to use my parents. Again, they're 78, 79. They worked elections. They worked campaigns. They did community stuff. But they're not retired from that. The problem is, in black communities nationwide, we haven't replaced that infrastructure. So we think that the infrastructure that was in place is social media. It's not. The power of that group was that they actually touched people. So we were far more aware of next election, whether it was school board. We have to understand, there are multiple elections every year. Some places it's a different election every single year. And so we have to reconstitute in black communities the black political infrastructure that was on the ground. The people who blew his office up. I can guarantee you, he knows exactly. He can recount probably 20 or 30 people. Sister so-and-so, brother so-and-so, who they always were there, and they were the ones who came back and told the folk what was going on. That's actually missing in California, in North Carolina, in Georgia, because they're retiring or they've died. So we have to replace that infrastructure. But if we treat politics 365, meaning election ends, and then it's, okay, my person won or lost. Now on the next day, we're going to rest, breathe. But on the next day, all right, they getting sworn in. What's our agenda? We're going to see them. Andrew Young got elected mayor of Atlanta. And the next day, he had protesters outside of his house. And he went, opened the window. He said, why are all of my friends out there protesting? And he went, and he did cuss. He said, what the hell are y'all doing? They said, Andy, you not a mayor. We gonna make you do what we want you to do. So you about to get protested. He had to understand that he went from activist to mayor. And they wanted him to understand that just because you our boy, don't mean we're not gonna put that pressure on you. We have to keep that going in every black community nationwide.
The other day, I was watching a split screen on CNN, and there was Paul Begala from the Clinton administration, there was Caitlin Collins, and then there was a Republican right-winger. There wasn't a dime's worth of difference between this was after the Michigan election. They were spouting exactly the same line, okay? So the Republicans, any crypto fascist is fine with them. He's one of us, she's one of us, right? You had Hakeem Jeffries refuse to endorse the Democratic nominee for mayor of New York in the general election, right? I mean, Carville is saying he's going to leave the Democratic Party if too many progressives are elected. So, I mean, do they care more about that consultant class holding on to their, piece of the action than they do about winning? Because Carville was always about winning, right? But he doesn't seem to be about winning right now if it's not to his liking. And the moderates also, they always said, like, okay, everybody has to fold in behind us. But when it's not us, it seems like it doesn't apply. And I just think, I feel like communities, people of color communities, women, LGBT people, have to tell these people either to get with the program, all we care about is that they have a D in their name. Either get behind the program or sit down and shut up.
No, they don't have to tell them. No. They don't have to tell them. You show them. And that's what they're feeling. Since we're here in California, 1984, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. gives a keynote address at the Democrat National Convention. While he is giving the address, they're meeting, and what they're meeting led to the DLC. The DLC, moderate conservative Democrats. They were scared to death of Reverend Jackson. They saw what was coming. That literally was happening while he was speaking. The DLC is how Clinton got elected. They were scared of Reverend Jackson's progressive politics. If you go back and look at Reverend Jackson, when he was talking about 84 and 88, that literally sounds like somebody running on the DSA campaign today. But they had to show them. So what Carville and Bagalia are freaking out by, they're freaking out because the public ain't listening to them. Plus, ain't nobody watching CNN like they used to, especially since I left 13 years ago. But the point is, I don't care.
I got that online, not on CNN. By the
No,
way.
I understand, but here's the deal. I don't care what the Crypt Keeper James Carville is saying. I don't care what Paul Bagalia is saying. Show them by winning. What Mamdani, anybody with a brain should be studying how that, he ran one of the most brilliant campaigns I have ever seen. And you know what he's doing now? Dude sends him a tweet and says, the water fountain at our park isn't working. The next day, he's showing up fixing the water. They like, what is he doing? That's called responsive politics. So what Bagalia and Carville should be saying is, that's what the people want. To Tracy's point, young voters, the voters are saying, we want fighters, not compromisers. So what is happening is the traditional folk are mad because people are tuning them out. And so our deal is, y'all keep yapping, we gonna keep organizing. You keep yapping, we gonna keep mobilizing. And the Democratic Party has never had a revolt inside of its party. Republicans had at the Tea Party. They were actually Republicans, okay? It's a different faction. The Freedom Caucus doesn't even number more than 40 people, but they control the politics on the GOP side on the House. There are more Congressional Black Caucus members than there are Freedom Caucus members. The CBC could be just as militant as the Freedom Caucus is if they chose to do so. We have to make them.
Okay. I would like to thank each of you. Well, you just, Roland, hit on what I wanted to talk about. That's the Black Caucus that's going to reconvene in September. My question, though, is we talk about organizations all the time coming together. Why is it so difficult for organizations, Black organizations, to come together? We are not going to move forward until we come together. It's not about me or this group or that group, but that's our biggest problem, is that we work in silos instead of working together. Everybody have something going on, let's say 10 things going on at the same time, instead of us coming together, working to make sure that this election we win.
I think there are multiple answers I would give to your question, but the ones that come to the top of my mind is sometimes people are paid to be divided. Like,
Sustained.
Because of the work that we do, and I just tell you a small story, drug companies work against us, even though we're one of their largest customers. We buy more drugs than anybody else on the planet, but they actively work against us. When we say to them, you should make sure that we get our fair share. Same thing happens within organizations. We can go down, and we often do, we go down the list and we look at legislators, who's taking drug money? How much are they taking? Because when that actively happens, that individual must tap dance to the tune of who pays. And I think that happens within organizations. Small organizations, trying to stay alive, somebody gives them $5,000, sometimes they'll sell their soul for that $5,000, and it will shut people down, keep people quiet. Presidents of those organizations are, oh, we can't do nothing about them. They gave us $5,000 last year. As opposed to, I'm going to take your $5,000, I'm still going to work with my colleagues over here, and next year you better provide us 10.
Real quick, we all do this thing. We all say, can we all come together? Jesus didn't get everybody to come together. That if Jesus couldn't do it, can't none of us do it. What we have to do is resist the urge of waiting for consensus. If I send an invitation out to 50 people and 10 show up, I'm not spending the meeting complaining about the 40 who didn't show up. I'm focused on the 10. And then what I'm gonna do to the 10 is say, all right, we meet next month. I need each one of y'all to bring 2 people. So now we go from 10 people to 30 people. And our next, I need the 30 of y'all to bring 2 people or 1 person. You build that way. We have to stop waiting on folk to show up. No, let that train take off. And so that's the whole deal. No, there's not been a single revolution in the history of the world that did not start with one person with an idea who said, hey man, what you think about this here? And he was like, man, I agree with you. The reason there is an MLK memorial on the mall in DC is because one of my Alfred brothers was sitting in his kitchen, I think it was in Maryland, and was talking to his wife, and he said, baby, I think we need a statue of Dr. King. And she said, baby, I think you're right. Yeah, I'm not serious, that's how that happened. He called some fraternity brothers and said, brothers, we need to build a monument for Dr. King. A single idea at a kitchen table led to the raising of $110 million, led to the opening of that memorial in 2011. That's the approach that we have to take. That was micro to macro. We gotta stop waiting. Don't wait for the October conversation. Today's August what? August 8th. When you leave here, you should be saying, I'm gonna call 2 or 3 organizations and say, we need to meet next week. What is going to be our plan to drive folks to the polls? We've got a mayoral election. We've got statewide elections. We ain't waiting for anybody else. You don't have to wait. And then when you do 3, say, hey, who else we gonna call? Next week is 5 or 6. But my point is simple. Do not wait and do not seek permission.
First and foremost, I want to thank AHF and Black for putting this together and making sure that we have this conversation in our community, because a lot of people don't care whether we have it or not. So thank you. Secondly, so my question is, and it's one that you've already answered, but sometimes Black people, we need to hear things more than once because we don't listen very well at all. So I'm gonna ask this question again. As individuals, and as representatives of organizations, what do we need to do to make sure that in November we have the numbers that you're talking about and we surpass them so that we can get back to where we're supposed to be and away from this crazy white man that's in office? Excuse me, Michael Weinstein, you were a good one.
Don't, he a crazy white man, or he crazy orange?
He crazy. What are our marching orders?
Where do you live?
We need to
Where do you live?
I live right here in Inglewood. I walk
What's
here
the zip
10
code?
minutes. 90305.
What you need to do is you need to go to the Board of Elections, go to their website. You need to pull the data of several precincts in this area.
Yes.
Pull the 24 data and the 22 data. So you want to first look at the number of eligible voters, the number of registered voters, and then how many people voted. It's all public. You can literally see who didn't vote and who did vote. So as opposed to this huge, let's just put a whole plan together for LA, you say, no. We're gonna pull 5 or 10 precincts, look at those numbers and say, oh, wait a minute. It's 400 registered people, but only 89 voted. So we're going to take our team, and we're going to say we're going to block walk, and we're going to hit every single door in that precinct to talk about upcoming election. So they don't know about the election, you go now and tell them. You're going to be armed with, this is the deadline to register to vote. Do you have early voting? But go micro. Let's stop with the huge plans. Just pull the data and say, and if you only have one group and you say, oh, we can just talk to 100 people. You look, these are the 100 addresses we're going to go to. Elections are now lost by small number of votes. A black man got elected Thursday of a county in Tennessee, and he won by 5 votes. That's how we have to be thinking, that granular, micro, small, down to the precinct.
I agree. And we got to go back to old school. I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we got to go back to the churches. That's where our organization and politics really started, in the church house. James Clyburn, one of the most senior members in Congress out of South Carolina, his 3 factors in any election for the last 50 years has always been the church first, the Greek organizations, and the Masonic organizations. He says that has been the core of organizing and reaching all the people that, his base, his voter base. So we need to go back to the basis, because we should have voter registrations in churches. Many churches don't do that anymore. This past election cycle, I was doing the church circuit, and I was told by one pastor, oh, we don't have politicians in our church. I'm like, who says that? But everything is politics,
What was his name?
I'm not going to say who it was, but
see, that's right there the problem.
But I'm just
Call
saying,
him out.
They just exactly. I agree. But it's
okay.
Just,
Fine, Stephen.
We don't have politics in our church.
Give me his name,
okay,
and I'll call him out.
If I could, sir, one of the things that I encourage, find 5 of your friends. Ask 5 of your friends if they're registered to vote. If they're not registered to vote, ask them what's important to them. When they tell you what's important to them, tell them the only way you're going to get that change, I guarantee you, is if you vote. 5 people. That's what I do. All my friends, you come to me, you come in my house, you're a part of my circle, you registered to vote. I don't care where you live. You registered to vote. That's what you have to do. We've got to make it that intimate, that serious, and that close.
I'm gonna give your pastor some homework. So I want you to, do you know Reverend James Meeks in Chicago? Good. I want you to call Reverend Meeks. When he was considering running for governor and mayor, he did something that was insane, but it was perfect. So he understood, first of all, how do you register people? So you had deputy voter registrars. So what he did was, he didn't schedule a meeting at his church on Tuesday. What he did was, at the end of service, he told everybody to stay, and they signed up voter registrars after the service. It was the largest sign up of voter registrar folks in Illinois history. So what we do is we try to create, so he used was his present capacity. And so I don't know what the deadlines are, what the process is here in California. That's a perfect example of, no, church over, stay in your seat, and had them fill the forms out, went through the training right there, and thousands signed up, and they were now deputized to become voter registrars.
We're going to take one more question, but to just talk about all this stuff. Everything started, like he said, on a micro basis. Start having meetings just with your friends, 3 or 4 of you guys, to just start talking and just have these kind of conversations. I think these kind of conversations is great. I always learn a lot listening to everybody, and I always learn a lot by listening to what questions people have. So let's take this last question.
Hi, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate everybody being here as well. My question is, I'm an advocate for prisoner. Me, myself, had a 25 to life sentence, and I've been out now for 13 years, and I've been advocating for prison since I've been out. My question to you is, one of the first things after me getting off parole that I did was join back to get my vote rights back in. But one of the things that I've been having struggles with is getting other inmates to do as well. And one of the things that I have been doing since I've been out is reaching out to different churches, different organizations, but really for no avail. They seem to not have any, I'm not going to say interest, maybe it's just not time, maybe I'm not doing it right. What could be some advice you could give me to get the churches, organizations to be interested in the returning citizens that wants to get their voter rights going, and just get some instructions and directions? Thank you.
What churches did you talk to already?
I will not be doing that.
I think that, so I'm
Better
sure,
give him that list.
I'm sure. So this is, let me give you the easy answer. A lot of times it's who you talk to and what the messaging is. Sometimes churches, believe it or not, or pastoral leaders don't always understand. You know, sometimes I think, you know, you look at a pastor, you assume because he or she is a good communicator that they have the mental dexterity to understand the details of what you're talking about. And a lot of times they need to be educated on what it is that's being presented. So I would start with saying, you know, what are some of the micro ways in which what you're already doing can be informational, where they can be trained on what these opportunities are. I think the second thing that could be extremely important is the ways in which you build coalition around the bigger idea of, you know, the power. Everyone, every pastor, every church has a population that is either coming out of the criminal justice system, impacted by the criminal justice system, somebody's mama, someone's daughter, someone's family. So when that conversation is happening, I think at the largest level, we're talking about the impact to our neighborhoods, to those churches in particular. I think it causes them to lean in a bit more, and then there is a level in which you can go much deeper into the specificity of what you feel like might be the opportunity. But I think a big part of it, and I think I said this from the beginning, it's really education. People don't know as much as we think they do. They don't understand it, and to the extent in which that we can get that information in front of them, find pastors, I think myself, our church, other churches who are already doing work around this topic, you can start building that coalition. My staff is here, we'll talk with you, get the information, and then we can help be an advocate with other churches to get them involved in doing this important work. But it really is about education.
And I would just piggyback on it. We in California changed the laws a number of years ago. Now felons can register to vote. And we made it a whole lot easier. And now we even encourage them to vote while incarcerated, because we want to make sure, because they're listed on census tracts where they're imprisoned, you know, but not allowing them to vote. And it's impacting their communities where they're from. So we want to make sure they can vote back in the neighborhoods where they come from, so their votes can be counted there versus where they're in prison. So we're doing that as well.
And that's my son right over here. His name is Micah. You talk to him, he'll get your information, and we'll get you set up. He's over in the corner. He'll raise his hands. You can see. Is he over there? Oh, he's not over there. He'll be back.
I think one more, they said one more question, since she's had her hand up for a while. Okay. Last question.
Hi. We had a similar conversation about the topics we have today at Cal State Dominguez. I work for Holiday Helping Hands, and we had a symposium yesterday at Cal State Dominguez where the topics that you are bringing to forefront, we talked about yesterday. And as the prisoners are getting out and making a change, there has an organization that says Change to help them transition from being incarcerated to coming out. We also train them in different medical fields. I'm a CNA instructor. I teach them CNA work to get them back into the workforce. Now, one thing we talked about yesterday is about our unity as Black people. When we stand up together, we must have a leader that says, okay, or someone needs to back down and say, we're all on the same accord. We know what we want to do. We know how we want to move. So one of us have to step back and say, okay, collectively, let's get this movement. Let's make this movement happen. And I see that in our community, there's no unity. Everybody wants to be in the front, and it can always be in the front. So we have to learn to take a back seat and get our agenda pushed to the forefront. That's how we discussed yesterday. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Let's give this panel a big hand. Thank you, guys. We've heard a lot of information tonight. It's about us. It's about us collectively. It's not about us individually. I think we talked a lot about giving out a lot of information and simplifying things. So I'm going to bring up a brother right now that's going to help us understand this ballot, and we're going to simplify it. I think we're done. Hey. Oh, yeah. Nah. Thank
Norm
you.
was like, you ain't got to go home. We got to get off this stage.
Boy, bye.
All right. Always.
Appreciate it, baby.
All right, always. All right, this time I'm going to bring somebody up that's going to help simplify the ballot and give everybody a lot of information. Mr. Shannon Lawrence, where are you, Brother Lawrence? Give him a...
All right, let's give it up for the panel again, man, while they can still hear you. And let's give a big rousing round of applause to AHF and Black. Okay, now let's give AHF and Black a round of applause as if they sponsored this. All right, so I don't know about you, but that was a healthy conversation. I am full, and my hope is that I can provide a little bit of dessert for you right now, amen? Just because we're in church. It's not the only reason why, not the only reason why. But I need you to do me a favor. I need you to repeat after me. Say, I am committed to my community. I am committed to my family. I am committed to myself. And with this commitment, I will be an educated voter. May the Lord hear the prayers of your mouth, and pull out your phones, please, because right behind me there's a QR code. And when you scan that QR code, you're going to get a chance to participate in a program. You may have seen the postcard on the tables when you registered, or maybe when you were eating. It said Ballot Basics on the front, and on the back it has a little bit about the program. And so now that we know what's at stake globally with this election, we're going to get a chance to learn about the election that we have, that we're going to be voting in November. And what we're going to do is a 3-part series that you'll be able to sign up for. And guess what? It's not open to just you. And so when Roland said bring one person or bring 2 people, you can tell them 2. And those 2 people could tell 2 people too. And we can have a whole party where we're learning what's going to be on the ballot, what's at stake, and how do we really engage in this election to be able to make a difference. Is there anything on, let me just ask you, raise your hands. Raise your hand if you know how you're going to vote on every single ballot measure in November. You know how you're going to vote on every single one. They all haven't even been approved yet, so we don't know. But the bottom line is that over 3 sessions between now and the November ballot, we're going to talk about all of it. We're going to talk about what's on the ballot, from the candidates to the ballot measures. We're going to talk about what's at stake. But more importantly, we're going to talk about how it impacts you. So, how many of you think that this is something that you, your neighbor, or your friend would benefit from? If you clapped your hands or you raised your hand, thank you very much. And we will see you on the Zoom. So if you did not get a flyer, please, I'm standing the way, I'm so sorry. So pull out your phones and you can scan the QR code and you can register. And once you register, then you're gonna get all the Zoom instructions. And I'm stalling because I'm waiting to see somebody to come get this mic from me. And with that, thank you very much. If you have any questions, happy to meet any of you guys outside. And that's that. So we'll see you in November. Thank you.